Welcome to the Crack The MBA Show. My name is Nupur Gupta and I'm your host for today. Our guest is Navneet Banka, who is a graduate of Cornell's one-year MBA class of 2022. Prior to Cornell, Navneet earned his accreditation as a chartered accountant and worked in financial services for 4 years in areas like equity research and treasury. Navneet is a graduate of St. Xavier's College in Kolkata. Through college and beyond, Navneet has been involved in numerous activities and social causes. At Cornell, too, he was an environmental finance and impact investing fellow, an MBA admissions ambassador, board member at Student Allies for Gender Equity, teaching assistant, among many other responsibilities. Navneet will be joining McKinsey and Company in their M&A practice in New York City. Navneet, thank you so much for joining us on this show. I know the introduction I've given is very, very brief. So would love to hear a little bit more for you to expand on your past life and introduce yourself a little bit more in your words. Thank you.
Sure, Nupur. Thank you for that introduction. I'm so glad to be here. So to talk about my background before MBA, like Nupur mentioned, I graduated in commerce from St. Xavier's College in Calcutta. And alongside, I was also pursuing the chartered accountancy designation here in India. After I qualified chartered accountancy, I interned with JP Morgan in Mumbai for a while, where I was working in equity research. And I was working with a team based out of Singapore. It was a great experience because I learned about valuation and something that I was deeply interested in and something that I had studied about back in college as well as in CA. Post that, I wanted to make a transition into a more front end investment management role. And that's when I decided to join BPCL in their treasury team. And I worked there for about 3.5 years. In this role, I was responsible for managing investments of a pension fund portfolio. And I also was exposed to leadership because I was required to manage a team of 4 direct subordinates. So it was a great learning experience as well. And while I was working in the firm, I realized there were more nuances of business that I wanted to learn about. And I wanted to expose myself to these other disciplines as well and make a pivot to consulting or internal strategy. And with that came the idea of pursuing an MBA. And that is when I was fortunately able to touch base with Nupur, and I was able to associate with Crack the MBA, and that's where my MBA journey started. I had appeared for GMAT by then, so I had a score, and accordingly, I was able to speak with Nupur and brainstorm on the schools that I wanted to apply to, and also look at what the possibilities would be. And with that, I had a great experience working with Nupur because I was able to stretch my own horizon and challenge myself with each application that I was putting in. And at the end, I was able to secure numerous offers from the schools that I applied to. And I decided to proceed with Cornell in their one-year full-time MBA program based out of Ithaca. And at Cornell, like Nupur mentioned, I was associated with a number of activities because Cornell had a lot of offerings in different interest areas that I had. And I was simultaneously recruiting for both finance and consulting. And I'm glad that I'll be proceeding with an offer from McKinsey and joining them soon, later this year.
Lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Navneet. What led you to choose Cornell?
Sure, Nupur. I recall when I was shortlisting schools that I wanted to apply to, Cornell caught my immediate attention because of the offerings that they had in terms of the electives, in terms of the different clubs that you could be a part of, be it in a leadership position or just an ally to the club, helping them advance their activities. And Cornell is also very strong on leadership that I came to know about through my interactions with the then current students. There were many treks and many leadership activities that keep happening on campus. And that was one of the primary goals I had when I was applying to different business schools. After speaking with the current students, I realized that Cornell really did embody the collaborative spirit that they talk about. I know this is prevalent across most schools, and you would be able to see that even on their websites. But I had a very pleasant experience speaking to candidates from different domains. And they went beyond just having that conversation, helping me connect with other folks at Cornell and helping me learn about the school as much as I could while I was doing the research. And that is also an attribute that I live by. I want to participate and assist in the capacity that I can. That really stood out for me when I was applying to Cornell. And once I had the offers, I evaluated and I realized that I wanted to go ahead with Cornell.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Navneet. Can you speak to us a little bit more about your admissions process? What really worked for you and what do you think you could have done better? And any advice for prospective applicants?
Sure, Nupur, I'd be happy to share that. The application process itself has many components. And I would like to talk about each component in the order that they appear before us. Most importantly, it's important that you be done with your GMAT or the GRE or any standardized test that you're wanting to take. A lot of schools these days are offering waivers, but again, that is something that the candidate must evaluate whether they want to go ahead with a waiver or they want to put in the best foot forward with a very strong GMAT score. GMAT is something that I started off with back in 2019 itself. And I tried to appear for the GMAT as many times till I got the score that I was most comfortable with. And after I had the score in mind and I had it with me, I then back in April 20 reached out to Nupur and I had a conversation with her. And the very first conversation stood out for me because Nupur was able to give me a reality check in terms of what I was expecting and what is required in the process. And that helped me realize the depth of the effort that I will have to put in throughout the application cycle. And that's when I started with the work of shortlisting the schools. I was inclined to applying to top business schools, both in the US and Europe. That is when I did my research. I visited the website, I contacted students, and I started learning about schools even before I could enlist the schools that I wanted to apply to. And I was keen on applying to both the 2-year and the 1-year MBA programs because I came from a background in business and I had a finance degree and an accounting degree with me. I wanted to leverage that and complete the core courses expeditiously. And hence, I was also inclined to 1-year programs wherever they were being offered. So I ended up applying to both 1-year and 2-year programs in US and in Europe. And that is when the application cycle began. One other aspect that really stood out for me during the application cycle with Nupur was the introspection that we spent adequate time in. It's very important to have your story in place because whenever you're applying to a business school, you're essentially trying to tell them who you are, what are your values, what are your goals, and why a particular school fits as a bridge between where you are and where you want to be. And that is something that I recall spending numerous hours with along with Nupur. And we went on with that discussion until we were very confident with what we wanted to convey to the admissions committee. At the same time, what is also important is to get your recommendations in place. Your recommenders must be notified well in advance that you're applying to X number of schools, and these are the possible deadlines so that they can make themselves available to submit the recommendation on time. The last thing you would want is for a recommendation to not be filed on time and missing the deadline. Coming to what stood out for me in the application process was being very sure of what my goals are and being articulate to the school about what your goals are and why you want to be in a particular school. It's very important that you have that level of specificity in your communication with the school. And why is it that you're inclined to pursuing an MBA from them? Because there are many top global schools. How do you then shortlist, or how does one particular school stand out for you? So I think it's very important where when a candidate is working on their application, that they dive deep into why this particular school, or for that matter, why MBA is relevant for them at this point in their career. So I think that is something that I was able to work on with Nupur's assistance and be very clear of what I wanted to convey to the admissions committee. In hindsight, if I would want to rework on something, I possibly could have started earlier in my process. I was aware about the round 1 and the round 2 deadlines. And I think I pretty much was able to catch up with Nupur's assistance. But to every candidate out there, I think it's important that you understand how much time you as an individual would be required to put in, given your situation, given your work commitments and everything else, your personal commitments, and be able to devise that timeline for you. So I think that is one recommendation I would have for candidates. And another thing that I would want the candidates to always like keep in mind is plan out how you want to apply to the different schools across the rounds. I remember I wasn't super confident with the score I had when I was applying to the top schools. So I and Nupur had this conversation as to how do we go about applying to these schools and what should our strategy be here. So what we did was we decided to go ahead with the best we could in round 1. And basis the outcomes of round 1, we decided to then draft the list of schools for round 2. And fortunately, because we had offers from round 1 and even from the schools that we did not have offer, I was waitlisted up to like the final stage. We were very confident that we could have progressed to some very top schools in round 2 as well. So that is how I would also want candidates to plan their journey, given everything that they have to offer in their application.
Couple of things that really stand out: get your test done in advance, right? So you were doing your test a year in advance of when you wanted to start your applications. Then another thing which is standing out is start earlier. So even though you started in April, you still think it makes more sense to potentially start even earlier if people have that time. And then another thing which is standing out is that work to secure and admit in round one.
Absolutely, Nupur.
Moving to your time at Cornell, can you share what for you is the unique value that Cornell represents?
Sure, Nupur. That's a great question. The first value that I would want to talk about that really stood out for me the moment I joined Cornell was their innovation in the way that they teach and in the way they also communicate information to candidates. I recall there was a ban on travel when I was starting my one-year MBA program back in May 21. And to everybody's surprise, there was a travel ban, and a good number of candidates from India were not able to travel down to Ithaca to even attend the classes in person. So that is when the school also immediately came out with a hybrid model. They had plans of going completely in person because even the professors were offering the classes in person. But understanding that there were candidates who were not present, Cornell had this plan to immediately have a hybrid model in place. Also, not just that, they understood that interacting socially with peers is also an important component of the MBA journey. And Cornell made it a point to have these social events over Zoom so that candidates who are not there in person do not feel left out from the program or do not miss out on any experience that the program has to offer. Because back then we weren't sure when the travel ban would be lifted. So I was pleasantly surprised by this initiative by Cornell and the Business School Johnson that they were able to implement this immediately upon the change in situation. And the second unique aspect that I have felt very strongly about at Cornell is the collaborative spirit that the school lives by. And I say so because even as I started the program, I recall reaching out to the then graduating students to understand prospects of career, both in finance and consulting. And although these were candidates who had already started working at different organizations, they were able to take time out to just have that communication with the candidate who's starting out on his MBA journey. And I recall almost every candidate reverted very quickly on the cold email that I'd sent them. And I was able to have that conversation with them. Cut to, I moved to the fall term, and the second years of the 2-year MBA program were also back to campus, and they were offering time out of their busy schedule to help us with recruiting. There was always that resource available. It was all upon us, like me and my peers in the 1-year MBA, to use that resource to the maximum. And that spirit exists in Cornell, I believe, largely also because Cornell is based out of this very beautiful small college town, Ithaca. And that also enables candidates to not just socialize in the school, but also end up socializing at almost the same places, the very few same places that Ithaca has. So I think that also builds on why there is a very strong sense of community here at Cornell. And that was one other unique aspect that stood out for me.
Navneet, you touched upon cold emails, right? Like reaching out to people cold. Given that you've obviously done that a lot through the admissions process for your recruiting, can you share any advice that you have for people to have success with cold outreach?
Sure, Nupur. I guess that's a very valid concern that prospective applicants also have when they're reaching out to people on LinkedIn or over email. So, one thing that I've learned through this experience is it's important to personalize the email that you're writing to people out there, be it at business school or even in an organization. Because the last thing you would want for somebody who's reading your email is to understand that you're just copying content from another email and pasting it and appearing that this individual is one of many individuals that you are reaching out to. So it's important to establish that connect over email so they even feel comfortable like reaching back to you and offering time from their schedule. So that was one thing that I learned through my experience. And it's also important when you are writing an email to offer flexibility from your end if that's possible. Because we know that candidates are either studying at business school or they're working in an organization. They are taking time out of their busy schedule. So you have to respect that fact. And hence, it's important that you do not state a specific time when you are available. It's important to offer like utmost flexibility that you can in your schedule because it also offers room for them to fit in their schedule into what you are offering. So these are the two learnings I had, Nupur, on this front.
Thank you for sharing that, Navneet. Navneet, a lot of people may not be aware about what living in Ithaca entails. If you could just share about what's Ithaca like and how your student life experience has been while you were at Cornell.
Sure, Nupur, I'd be happy to share my experience in Ithaca. And when I talk about my experience in Ithaca, I would want to talk about three different aspects there. I would want to talk about the town itself and where is it based and how does the infrastructure there look like. Second, I would want to talk about how comfortable is it staying there in terms of the weather, because Ithaca is based in the Northeast. So I would also want to touch on that. And third would be how convenient or not convenient it is to stay in a college town because you would be spending considerable time there. To first talk about the town itself, Ithaca is in New York State. It is about at a 4 hour drive from the New York City. And it is in upstate New York. So it's a small college town and it has a hilly terrain that I was also surprised by when I reached there. The town is very beautiful. It has a lot of offerings in terms of nature. So if you are a person who loves to hike, loves to trek, Ithaca has a lot of that to offer. The Cornell campus itself, that is based in the heart of Ithaca, is also supremely beautiful. We do not hear of so many campuses having three waterfalls right inside the campus. That only adds to the beauty of this beautiful town, Ithaca. Talking about the infrastructure, people normally drive around the town. They get their own vehicles, and it's easy to use that to travel down to a Walmart or a Wegman or even to the campus for that matter. And it also has the public transport available in terms of the TCAT buses. It does not have a subway station because it's a small town, but the TCAT bus service helps you reach every point within the city. As a Cornell student, you get direct access to the bus and you don't have to pay a fee for using that service. So this is about how Ithaca is as a town. And secondly, I would want to talk about weather. And this is a very important aspect. There is a pro and con when we talk about weather at Ithaca. So the pro is Ithaca would let you experience every weather that US has to offer. It has a beautiful summer where you could just chill with your peers at different places and enjoy a meal right outside at the cafes that are there in the city. Then comes the fall weather where you do see the beautiful trees and you see different colors in that weather. And then comes the winter, which is supremely extreme. It goes to abysmal low, the temperatures. And but then again, there's a way out. You will be advised by your seniors to get those adequate and those appropriate attire that will help you survive the extreme cold. And that is there until again when the spring sets in somewhere in April. So you do get to experience these weathers, and I think it's a good experience to have, especially as an international candidate when you've not seen all these different weathers as part of your life. So this was about the weather, Nupur, and then I would want to go to the last bit, which was about how convenient is it to stay here vis-a-vis like your life at campus. So what I would want to say is because it's a small town, it has all the amenities in terms of cafes, in terms of libraries, in terms of going for these trails and hikes that I spoke about. I just believe that because it's a small town, it only enables candidates to go for the same activities as a group. So that fosters or that at least gives you that opportunity to network with your candidates, which I believe could be slightly hindered in a big town where everybody has their own thing to do. But because it's a small town and there are only so many offerings, you are able to leverage that to also build into your experience in the MBA program. And the travel down to the campus is not painful. Like I said, it's a small town and there is this public transport available. For most candidates, it doesn't take more than 10 or 15 minutes to reach the campus from home.
You talked about travel to campus, right? So then is it fair to say that most MBA students live off campus?
Yes, Nipur. So most candidates end up staying outside of campus, though there is graduate housing available on the campus, but MBA candidates tend to stay at these select neighborhoods that are spread across the town and which also have very easy commute down to the campus.
Can you name some of these neighborhoods?
So there are three primary neighborhoods where MBA folks tend to stay together. One is Maplewood, and I was staying very close to Maplewood. I was not able to get an apartment there, so I was staying at a place which is right next to Maplewood. The second is College Town Terrace, that's located in College Town, and that is also at almost the same proximity as Maplewood is. And the third is the city center, which is situated in downtown. So there are many apartments there in the downtown area, and it's bustling with energy because you have all the restaurants and all the great things happening there. But that's a tad bit farther away from the campus as opposed to Maplewood and CTP.
What's something you wish you knew before you got to Cornell?
Little did I realize that the city has a very hilly terrain. And I was accounting for being able to walk in, let's say, like 10 minutes from where I was staying to where the campus was. And I was aware that the city has a hilly terrain, but I was not aware how bad or not good it's going to be once I reach there. So I think that is something that I had to account into my schedule. I had to like rework on my schedule to include more travel time because it's pretty difficult to like run uphill as opposed to walking on plain ground, right? I believe that was something that I wish I knew regarding life at Ithaca. And since we're talking about that, I think another thing that we learned about that as we started the program, but I learned more of it when I was able to travel down to US, how fast the recruiting is going to be like, especially in a 1 year MBA program, because 3 months into the program, you have to hit the ground running with preparation. And very soon you will be having these companies open their job applications. We were aware about the timeline, but once I reached there, I realized how crucial it was to like get everything in place in that short span of time. So these were two things that came as a surprise to me once I reached Ithaca.
Navneet, what's something that you would want prospective students to know about Cornell, or that you wish that they knew about Cornell and Johnson School?
One thing that I would want prospective candidates to know about at Cornell is that the school has a great presence in terms of the key industries that prospective applicants target, be it consulting or banking or the other fields in finance like corporate finance or research and even tech for that matter. So Cornell has a lot to offer in terms of the resources to prepare you for these different industries. But at the same time, the number of resources could get overwhelming for candidates who are just starting off in the MBA program and at Cornell. So, what I would advise for candidates to do is be very sure of the career path that they want to take and then stick to that resource that the school has to offer for that particular career path.
What would you describe as a must do experience at Cornell?
I would want to talk about being able to participate in a lot of leadership activities that Cornell has to offer. So Cornell was able to organize these different treks to nearby places, and these are called the leadership treks, and they happen in all the terms that you're studying there. So you can choose to participate in the term that you're most comfortable with, depending on what you are prioritizing in that particular term. And this is a very unique offering that is given by Cornell. Like I know, for instance, Cornell is able to take people to these different treks, which are like 3 or 4 day long, and you have to lead that trek. You're not just a part of that, but you would be accorded the responsibility to lead your team of peers in these different locations and in different situations and come out as a successful leader. So that's a very unique way of conveying these leadership abilities. It's not just confined to a classroom where you talk about these leadership principles or where you talk about how you can grow as a leader, but it goes beyond that to these real life experiences where they want you to experience that. One additional resource in leadership is that Cornell offers candidates to go to a Marine Corps base out of Quantico in Virginia. And Cornell and I believe the Wharton School are the only two schools that take their candidates to this particular experience. And there you get to be a part of this great institution and you learn about leadership under stress situations. So these are some very great offerings by Cornell, the business school at Cornell, and I would really encourage candidates to like leverage as much as they can in the time that they have in hand.
Incredible. Thanks for sharing that, Navneet. And what would be an example of the leadership experience that you were talking about? Maybe one or two examples of that?
Sure. The experience that I want to talk about, Nupur, is a leadership crisis challenge that I was a part of in the spring term of my study. So I and a group of my peers, we participated in this case competition, and this was at the business school. And we were given information on one particular evening. There were different teams that were competing in this competition, and we were put in one conference room where there was information disclosure. We came to know about a particular company and what it is struggling with. And then each team was sent to a different breakout room where we had to come up with a strategy of what we want to convey as a team to the board of this company. And as part of this experience, while we were making the strategy, the information kept coming in either through email communications or like a piece of paper being slid under the door of the room that you are in. And you had to take all that information in and revise your strategy because potentially you were suggesting something that no longer is valid. So that was a great experience. And I realized that there were different occasions in that experience where different team members were taking lead with the information that we had, because potentially somebody in the team would have better understanding of that particular situation or that information overload that we suddenly had. So organically, different candidates were taking up that experience of leadership in that challenge. And the very next morning, we had this make-believe board that was there in a conference room, and we had to present our strategy. And that was a very high stress situation because the board was constantly interrupting because they were told to do so. They were challenging the hypothesis that we were building upon. And at that time, also, you had to step in for your team. You could just not be responsible for your section of the presentation because you are representing a team here. So that was again a leadership experience that we had. And the best part about this experience, Nupur, was that we were given feedback. Each candidate was given feedback on how they performed, what they could potentially work on. And that was hence like a great experience.
Amazing. Navneet, can you talk about your favorite academic experiences, naming specific courses and professors?
So, Nupur, there were a couple of courses that stood out for me in the electives that I took in the fall and the spring term. The course that I had the best experience in was called the Sustainable Global Enterprise Practicum. So, Cornell Johnson, as a business school, has a unique offering called immersion. And as an MBA candidate, you can participate in one immersion in the spring term, whichever is best aligned to your career. At that point in time, I knew I was entering into consulting, but I wanted to step outside my comfort zone. And I have always been wanting to learn more about sustainability because it is being spoken about at every place right now. So I took up the Sustainable Global Enterprise Immersion. And as part of that immersion, there was this course called the Practicum Project. In this project, you get to work with a group of other MBA candidates on a real life project with a company that is associating themselves with Cornell for this course. I was put in a team with four other candidates who had never met before in a project that I was most uncomfortable with because the school wanted for you to have a good learning curve and wanted to place you in a place that you were not most comfortable with. So that was a great experience because not only did I learn about the context of sustainability, how a particular company is thinking about it, and what are the potential areas in their business that they can incorporate more sustainable practices, but also develop the ability to communicate with the leadership in that company and work with a group that I've not worked with before. So that was a great experience. And this course was spread across the entire term. So we got feedback all along the way from the professor as well as from the leadership of the firm that we had associated with. So it was a great experience and a very enriching one, I must say. The second course that, again, I had a great experience with in the fall term was this course called Demystifying Big Data and FinTech. So, as somebody from finance, I wanted to learn about the fintech space and how the finance in the tech world is operating and what is the role of big data these days in the huge tech companies. And this course was led by Professor Will Kong. And in that course, we had some great discussions. And at the end, we had to write a thesis on a particular topic that we had been given. And again, that was an opportunity for me to work with candidates I had not worked with before and on a topic that was like very interesting to me at that point in time. So these are the two courses I would say were the highlights in my academic career at Johnson.
Navneet, given your significant involvement in extracurricular activities at Cornell, can you tell us about the activities of each of the groups that you were involved with?
Sure, Nupur. I'd be happy to talk about the initiatives that I was a part of at Cornell. I was primarily a part of four initiatives that I want to talk about. So I was an MBA admissions ambassador at Cornell for the one-year MBA program, but was also catering to candidates applying to the two-year MBA program. I was a part of the Environmental Finance and Impact Investing Fellowship as well. Third, I was also a part of the Student Allies for Gender Equity. I was a board member in that club. And the fourth activity that I took up was the teaching assistant work with one of the professors in the course called Evaluating Capital Investment Project. And I would want to talk about each of them.
Yeah, just one other addition, Navneet. As you talk about them, if you could also mention how you benefited or what skills you acquired from each of these activities, that would help also. Thanks.
Sure, Nupur. So to begin with, the role of the MBA admissions ambassador, I signed up for this role because I understand that prospective applicants want to reach out to current students in the schools that they are applying to. And I wanted to be a resource for them because I understand what value I had gained by speaking to student ambassadors and other students in the schools that I applied to. So as a part of this role, I would set up my office hours every week where prospective applicants could sign up. There were a lot of candidates who were reaching out to me on LinkedIn or over email. And I, in response, would send them a Google form where I had posted my availability for that one particular week. And the candidates could sign up for that, and I would be notified. And there would automatically be a link sent to them of my personal meeting room on Zoom. I was glad that I was able to cater to candidates who had a lot of questions that otherwise they don't get information on from the website. I was able to speak to about 150 candidates by the time I graduated from the program. And a great learning from this experience, Nupur, was that it also helped me convey what the school had to offer.
That's helpful. One follow up question, Navneet. To the extent that you can share this information, are such conversations evaluative?
The conversations themselves are not evaluated, but at the same time, I can vouch that the admissions committee is always eager for the admissions ambassador to share insights on any candidate that have stood out for them in the conversations. So that is something that we were entrusted with as a responsibility, and we would oftentimes reach out to the admissions committee on any candidate that we wanted them to pay attention to in the application process.
One other follow up question, and again, to the extent that you can share, For the candidates that stood out for you or that you wanted to vouch for, what were some traits that these candidates had?
One thing that oftentimes stood out for me when I was speaking to candidates is the clarity in the goals that they had. They knew for a fact that this is a career path that they want to pursue. And even if they were not strong headed about one career path and they had a couple of alternatives in mind, they knew the reason why they wanted to make that switch through the MBA. It's important even for the school to understand why you are wanting to pursue an MBA from that university, given the goal you have in mind. So that is something that stood out for me maximum times that I had conversations with the candidates. And another factor that I would insist for candidates to talk about in their communications with student ambassadors or even other students at school is what research they have done on the school and what is it that stands out in the school for them. Most of the top schools have a lot to offer in terms of the resources. And how do you picture yourself as a student in that school is something you can answer only with the research that you have done. So make sure you're also conveying that research to the student ambassadors. That is also something that I would mention in my communications to the admissions committee whenever I'm vouching for a candidate.
Understood. That's really helpful. Thanks, Navneet. And then you were talking about the other experiences as well.
So next, I would want to talk about the Environmental Finance and Impact Fellowship that I was a part of at Cornell. So at the end of the summer term, there was an option for us to apply for this fellowship. You have to submit 3 essays to the Sustainable Global Enterprise Club, and they would evaluate applications and find a fit with the fellowship. And then you have an interview process that you have to undergo, establishing why this is one domain that you want to learn about and how can you contribute as a potential fellow in the program. After I was able to secure that acceptance into the fellowship, I was required to take a certain list of electives through my fall and spring term to end up graduating as an environmental finance and impact investing fellow. So I would design my academic career suitably. And in addition to that, one of the unique offerings of this fellowship was a capstone project that you get to work on during your fall and the spring term. And again, on this capstone project, you can either source that by yourself and have a communication with the faculty on what it is that you want to work on, or you take Cornell's assistance in sourcing a project. Cornell had a lot of projects to offer in the year that I was a fellow. And I was a part of this one project where I was working as a pro bono consultant with a financing firm that was financing organic farming and was helping small farm businesses in the larger New York state. And I would meet with the leadership of the firm every week and work on the project and devise a strategy on how can they handpick those businesses that they want to offer financial assistance to. So there was a lot of financial modeling involved. I created a model that was used by the firm in evaluating the different lendees that they had for finance. And that was a great learning experience, Nupur. And at the end of this fellowship, all the members who are part of this fellowship are required to make a presentation in the atrium. That's an open space in the Johnson School. And you have this poster that is put up about your project, and you have to explain that to every student who's passing by. So I think that was a great learning experience to be placed in that environment and be ready to answer all the questions that are being fired your way. So that was a great learning experience, Nupur, from that experience.
How many fellows are there, and how large was the audience that you were presenting to?
There were about 30 fellows in the class of 22, both from the 2-year and the 1-year MBA program. They were part of this fellowship. And the atrium is this one open space that we have right in the center of the Johnson School where all the candidates had their canvases put up with the presentations. And it was open to candidates who were pursuing the sustainability immersion. And there was this one class on sustainability speaker series. So candidates who were attending that had an open invitation to come down and view the presentations and ask questions. So I would say that the audience size was about 150 to 170, and they were going across different presentations.
Very nice. And what motivated you to become a fellow, Navneet?
I was coming in with an experience in finance where I had learned about research and I had learned about investment management. And I wanted to see how finance fits into sustainability and what role does finance play at the intersection of sustainability and finance. Because companies today want to be sustainable because they understand the urge and the need for that in today's world. But at the same time, they need to understand how efficiently they must deploy resources in finance. So because I had an understanding of finance and I was taking an immersion in sustainability, I decided that I also want to be a part of this fellowship and see how the intersection works and what can I do as a potential finance candidate later on in my career if I want to make that pivot later on in my life. So the next opportunity that I was a part of was this club called the Student Allies for Gender Equity. So the club was formerly known as Johnson Allies for Women, and it was rebranded as SAGE, or Student Allies for Gender Equity. And we were very excited with this rebranding because Sage Hall is the name of the business school building as well. So I was part of this one club, and I was a 1 year MBA representative on the board. And I was always very curious to understand how I, as a male identifying candidate, can offer allyship to women in business. And that was one of the major goals of this club, that it was extending allyship to the Women in Business Club at Johnson. We had a couple of activities that I was a part of. First was helping the WIB, or the Women in Business Club, organize events, and also organize events where we individually as a club would educate our peers about allyship and about the different difficulties that women face at business and how can we offer assistance. So that was one of the key offerings of the club. And second was this newsletter that was circulated across the 1 year MBA, the 2 year MBA, and the other programs at the Johnson School, where we would have these different articles that we wanted candidates to read and improve their understanding about gender equity at workplace. So these were the two unique offerings of the club. And as somebody who had worked in this space remotely, so back at BPCL and other entities that I was a part of pre-MBA, I wanted to leverage that experience, but at the same time enhance my own understanding of what it means to be an ally at workplace, because I would also be starting off a career in the US.
And what about the fourth opportunity as a TA?
I was able to apply for a TA-ship with a professor named Arkadev Chatterjee, and he was teaching the valuations class in the spring term of my study, as well as this course called Evaluating Capital Investment Projects. This is how the teaching assistantship works. Either the professor reaches out to you because they've taught you before in an earlier class, or you can submit your application for the TA-ship to the specific professor that you want to work with. I was able to submit my application to Professor Arkadev, and I was very excited to work with students who were just starting off understanding what finance is, what capital investment means at a firm. And I had studied these subjects pretty much in depth in my previous degrees. And so I wanted to be a resource to these candidates so that they could reach out to me for the simplest of queries.
Can you speak to us a little bit about the recruiting timeline at Johnson?
Given that I was a part of a 1 year MBA program, candidates in my program were aiming for the full-time opportunities and not for summer internships. And I would want to talk about that for different industries. I would want to first talk about consulting, and then would go into finance and tech, because these are the three more important, I would say, domains that people get into. So for consulting, how it happens is you start off with networking. That's a very important part of the consulting recruiting journey. And that starts off anytime in July and August, because the applications for most consulting firms open up as early as in September. So you would want to reach out to the existing practitioners in your target firms pretty much in advance, so that you can improve your understanding of the firm and can also develop your own network ahead of you applying in September. So September is when the applications open up, then you get the interview invites, and that happens sometime towards the end of September and goes all the way until the mid of November. So consulting is one such industry that follows a very structured recruiting path, like it's laid out for the business school. Candidates in the 1 year MBA program, if they are interested in finance, would ideally go into corporate finance or equity research or asset management. So for corporate finance, again, the recruiting cycle is very structured. You are expected to network in your target firms somewhere in August, and applications open either in September or in October for most of the industries that are offering a position in corporate finance. When it comes to equity research and asset management, I would say the recruiting is more just in time. It depends on when the firms, the target firms, feel the need for another candidate in their practice. And hence, the recruiting for these are a little unstructured. And while there are opportunities in the fall term, there would be more opportunities towards the end of the spring term, because that's when most candidates graduate. And that's when the firms are also looking to hire these graduates right after graduation. So this is how it works for equity research and asset management. And I would end with talking about the tech industry, Nupur, because that is, again, a huge industry that candidates at Johnson were a part of and were aiming to be a part of. So for tech, I realized Amazon had a very structured recruiting path. They came sometime in the month of August and opened their applications for various tech positions for candidates who were there in the second year of their study in the MBA programs at different schools. And for the rest of the tech companies, the recruiting again is more just in time and based on the vacancies that these different firms would have. And hence, largely that happens in the spring term. And that also warrants for you to network all the more.
Navneet, now can we specifically talk about your full time recruiting process? You mentioned earlier that you were recruiting for both finance and consulting. So if you could just tell us how you navigated the entire process, the kind of offers you secured, and if it was all through on campus recruiting or was there an off campus component as well?
I had an idea of proceeding with my applications for both finance and consulting roles. And for finance, I was more inclined to a corporate finance or a corporate strategy role. And I was working on the finance applications right from the time I started off my MBA journey, because I was aware that for corporate finance, as I reiterated before, the applications pretty much open in August, especially for tech companies like Amazon. So I had to get everything else done before that. So as I started off with my program, I was able to enlist the activities that I had to take care of ahead of the applications opening up. And these included working on your resume, getting your pitch in place, working on your behavioral answers, working on prep for the technical part of the interview, and also networking with the existing practitioners. So I was able to enlist these activities and hence be able to stick a particular timeline to each activity so that I'm able to well in advance complete these before the applications open up. In the first 3 months of my study, we had numerous conversations with the Career Management Center. We were also placed in career work groups, we call them at Johnson, or the CWG. We were placed in summer career work groups where a graduating student would lead these calls on a weekly basis. And that was one opportunity for us to prepare our pitch for the interviews and to also get our resume vetted, not just by the person leading the call, but our peers as well who were part of that CWG. So that was a great resource. Towards the end, it was also important for us to start sending out these emails for networking to the existing practitioners from the Cornell University in these companies. We weren't just reaching out to the Johnson alums in these companies, but candidates from the larger Cornell University. So that was also something that I worked on ahead of my application so that I had all the requisite information before I would apply to a particular firm. And it so happened that I ended up applying to the corporate finance opportunities that opened up at the start of the fall term. And I interviewed with Amazon. That was the first shortlist I had for a corporate finance role. Amazon was one company, Nupur, where networking is not an essential part of the recruiting, but it helps to participate in all the sessions that they're hosting. And this was an on-campus opportunity. We had a session, a Johnson-specific session of Amazon, and it is recommended that you participate in these opportunities and learn about what Amazon has to offer and accordingly build your communications going forward. So that was something I did ahead of my interview invite. And for Amazon, you're also required to appear for this online test that they have, where you are tested on your ability to adapt to different situations at work. So there would be a simulated environment and you're required to answer questions. That happens after you've submitted the resume. You appear for this test. And once you clear that, you get an invite for the interview. And for the interview, you have a specific week that you get to prepare. And then on the D-Day, you have these 4 interviews, which are like right one after the other that you have with 4 interviewers. And because I was going for the Finance Leadership Development Program, it's a rotational program for MBA graduates. I was also required to participate in this one case exercise that I had as part of my 4 interviews. So that was the Amazon process. And I was able to hear back from them pretty much within a week's time. Before I go into consulting, Nupur, do you want me to highlight any particular aspect of what I spoke about?
Maybe just one other thing, Navneet. You talked about a case interview, right? So, what kind of preparation did you do for that?
So, Nupur, for Amazon, as part of the FLDP application, again, you're required to work on this one Excel data that you get. And there are specific questions that are posed at the end of the data that you're being presented. You're required to work your answers for those and then devise a strategy for the larger question at hand. For this exercise, how I went about working on this was I scheduled my calls with the second year MBA candidates of the 2-year program who were interning with Amazon over the summer and understand the purpose of the exercise and how did they work on the exercise when the same was given to them. So that is how I worked on it because there isn't a sample data available for such exercises. So the best you can do is try to understand what this data entails and how can you prepare? What are the finance concepts that you must definitely be sure of as you prepare yourself for this particular case exercise? And in addition to that, I also had these mock interviews with the Career Management Center, where I ensured that I was tested on the technical aspect of finance. So at least my concepts are in place for this case exercise whenever that comes as part of the journey. So the next that I want to talk about is consulting. As I started off my journey at Cornell, I was primarily inclined to securing a position in corporate finance, A, because I had the skills that I believe were transferable to a corporate finance role, having worked in equity research and treasury management. So that was my prime strategy. But at the same time, I did want to make a pivot to consulting. I started doing my research about the different firms that do come to Johnson and pick candidates up for a full-time position. During that research, there were a number of firms that stood out for me that had these specific practices within the number of practices that they had in their firm. I started targeting those specific practices where I believed I, as a candidate from finance, could best offer the firm. But the consulting journey was completely different from what I did for finance. It is a different ball game altogether. It is one industry where you are expected to reach out to the practitioners, not just to develop your network in the firm, but also for you to understand if you feel you fit with the culture of the firm. And it is also an opportunity for the practitioners and for the firm at large to understand you as a candidate. So again, that was something that I started off pretty much in advance because I was aware that this is a critical component of the application process. And there were also many Johnson facilitated events there where different firms would come to campus and have these events where you could speak with different practitioners and understand about different practices and whatever questions I and my peers had regarding that particular firm. Johnson helped us a lot with that. The Johnson Consulting Club also helped host these events with graduating students or students who had graduated from Cornell a few years back who were working at these firms. So that was another opportunity for us to connect with the folks in these different firms. And I recall there were also opportunities on campus, Nupur, where we were able to meet with the leadership at these firms and get an opportunity to understand the practices better. So that is one component of the application that I believed I spent considerable time in. But because I was dual recruiting, I realized it was a lot of back and forth between the two domains that I was juggling between. So I then realized that it was also important for me to work on two more aspects that are very critical to a consulting recruitment journey. And these are casing and your behavioral interview. To talk about casing, I believe it's important for a candidate to first learn about the different industries. That's how I went about it. I would do a lot of study about different industries because you could be given a case about any industry that you have absolutely no knowledge about. And it is important that you develop a basic understanding of how the industry operates. So we had great resources that the consulting club also offered, where we were able to study about these different industries. And then comes the frameworks. There are different frameworks that apply to different business situations. And it's important for you to become comfortable with the jargons that apply to a certain kind of case in mind. After having learned these, I then spent considerable time casing with my peers because during the summer, we did not have the candidates from the 2-year MBA program because they were spending their time in the summer internship. So we would spend time casing with one another and casing with the graduating students from Cornell because the Career Management Center had also set this resource up. There was this Google Sheet where there were details available of people who were offering time. And we would reach out to them and have that casing session as well. So that is how we started off with casing. And once the fall term set in and the 2-year MBA program candidates came back, we were able to also case with them because they had gone through that journey when they were going for the summer internship recruiting journey. That also speaks to the way Johnson operates. It's a very collaborative environment where people really want the other candidate to succeed. It was never a problem for us to reach out or look for the resource where we wanted to do these practice sessions. One key takeaway that I had, Nupur, from this experience was while it's important to practice casing so that you become comfortable with that way of interviewing, you should refrain from, I would say, over practicing to the extent that you become monotonous in the way you're presenting your ideas. You are expected to be very creative in the way you're talking about a business situation. What you bring to the table is very important from what you've just learned. So I would want candidates to stick to ensuring that they're creative in the way they present their ideas. And before I get into the behavioral part of the journey, Nupur, would you want me to talk any more about casing?
Just one question, Navneet. You talked about frameworks and preparing about frameworks. Can you give a couple of examples of frameworks?
Sure, Nupur. So frameworks are, you could think of it as a skeleton that can be applied to a particular kind of case in mind. So for instance, there is a business that is struggling with profitability, and you have been called upon as a consultant to dissect the problem and present your ideas. So you could have a number of ideas in your brain. You could think about a particular product line not doing well, or a particular kind of cost that has risen up. But you are expected to present this idea in a structured manner. There could be a number of ideas that you have, but how do you present them? So that's where a structure comes into place. So for this particular situation at hand, I would use the profitability framework. So profitability, as we know, is a function of revenue and cost. So my structure would have revenue and cost. Within revenue, I could talk either in terms of geographical split of the revenue, or I could talk about product segmentation, or there could be any way that you could split your revenue, and then you could talk about each part in more detail, whether it's the price that is impacted or a quantity. Coming to the cost, you could talk about the variable cost and fixed cost, and then talk about your ideas within that bucket. So that is how a framework works. And you're expected to learn about these different frameworks just so that you can present your ideas in a structured manner. This was about the casing part of the preparation. And we've also spoken about networking. So the last bit that I want to talk about is the behavioral interview, or the behavioral part of an overall interview. I cannot overemphasize the significance of that, because oftentimes candidates spend adequate amount of time doing the case practice, because that's very unique to the consulting journey. But it's very important to realize that you are also being asked to talk about your past experiences. And it's very important that you think of the stories that you want to bring to table whenever you're talking with a potential interviewer. Hence, it's important for you to spend adequate time thinking about those stories and presenting them in the format that you're expected to present in. It's more likely the STAR format: situation, task, action, and result. So you're expected to present your story also in that manner. And hence, it requires and warrants that kind of attention. So I would recommend candidates to also spend adequate time preparing these stories and practicing them again with their peers. I was able to practice them with my peers from the 1-year MBA program. I could also spend time with the 2-year MBA candidates and with the Career Management Center, because it's always good to have different people be able to give you feedback on how they feel about a story that they have absolutely no context of. This was about the behavioral interview.
By when did you have your offer?
So Nupur, I ended up applying to those target firms that I had in mind. By the time I had the interview invites from these firms, I also had the Amazon offer in hand. So it was then that I decided to target my efforts to just a couple of firms from the invites that I had, because I was able to decide then if I would be proceeding with all the interviews or not.
What invites did you have at that point?
The primary invites that I had, Nupur, were from McKinsey, from LEK, from EY Parthenon, and I did have a couple other invites, but these were the primary ones that I had. And McKinsey happened to be the first interview that I had in consulting. And I had a considerable time gap between having received the interview invite and my interview with McKinsey. Again, for McKinsey, the structure of the interview is slightly different for the New York office that I was applying to. So the New York office and the New Jersey office have an initial round, and then they have a final round. So the initial round includes just one interview with one senior practitioner, where you're tested on both the behavioral interview as well as a case. And then once you clear that round, you're invited to the final round, which has 3 oftentimes consecutive interviews, where again in each interview, you are tested on a behavioral question and a case. So this is how the structure was for McKinsey. Once I went through the process, the good thing about McKinsey, they let you know the result that very evening. I had the McKinsey offer in hand, Nupur, by the end of October, even before I had my other interviews with the other firms. So at that point in time, I evaluated the options that I had in hand, and I very critically thought over this one practice that I was getting to be a part of. I wanted to be in New York. I love the East Coast, so I wanted to be in New York, and I wanted to work in something that was close to finance. And I was getting an opportunity, Nupur, to work in the mergers and acquisitions practice in the New York office. That was also aligned to my overall goals of wanting to build a career in a specific domain, even within consulting. So I was very happy with the offer at hand, and I decided to go ahead and accept that, which is why I did not appear for the other interviews that I had. And that was for me the end of the recruitment journey.
Many congratulations for all your hard work paying off, Navneet. Navneet, can you tell us a little bit about the placements for Indian students specifically at Cornell?
I would talk about the metrics for the 1 year MBA program because I was more closely working with the candidates from this program. For the year that I was recruiting, that is for the class of 22, I saw the largest number of candidates going into consulting, which was about, I would say, 40% of the total class size that was recruiting, because we also do have a number of candidates who are dual degree candidates. So they continue to pursue their academics in Cornell and hence they're not recruiting for full-time positions. So from the candidates who were recruiting, about 40% went into consulting. And within consulting, I have seen most candidates go into McKinsey and EY and PwC as well. So we had the maximum number of offers from these three entities. To move to the next highest number in terms of industry, that was tech. So a good number of candidates were going into tech. And there were candidates who were recruited in the fall term, as well as those who got recruited in the spring term. And within tech, the largest recruiter was Amazon. Then to talk about the finance sector, there were candidates who were going for very specific niche roles within finance.
Before we get to finance, Navneet, for tech, were there any other employers that were recruiting Indian candidates?
So Nupur, we did have Microsoft open their application in the fall term, and there was one candidate who was able to secure an offer there, but the candidate was not an Indian candidate. So Amazon was the largest recruiter, I would say, for Indian candidates in the tech sector. And then moving on to finance, there were a number of candidates who were gunning for roles in equity research or asset management. And there were also a couple of folks from our class who also made a cut into banking, but they also had previous experience which was relevant to banking. The 1 year MBA is not tailored for people who want to go into investment banking because it's almost always required that you undergo a summer internship. But there were a couple of candidates who were not Indian candidates but had previous experience, and hence they were able to pivot into banking even through the resources of the 1 year MBA program. But largely the candidates were going for research, equity research, or asset management roles. I know of candidates who are going into JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, but again, very few Indian candidates were gunning for these roles in the first place. So we had a lot of domestic candidates go into these roles.
So then would it be fair to say that the Indian candidates were largely focusing on consulting and tech?
Yes, no, but that was precisely the case with our cohort.
You know, one thing there's been a lot of chatter about is impending recession. Have you been hearing anything about it at all?
Yes, Nupur, we have been having this conversation, like even after business school, about how the impending recession is like shaping up and how that is expected to disrupt certain industries. Potentially, what we are hearing is there could be a decline in the hiring by certain industries that had recruited in large numbers in the previous years, because companies would want to like curtail the headcount that they have and they would want to do maximum with what they already have.
Navneet, as we come to a close, can you share your thoughts on how prospective and incoming students can be better prepared to hit the ground running?
Sure, Nupur, I'd be happy to do that. To start off with the admitted candidates, first off, congratulations on making the cut and going to your dream schools. In hindsight, if I would want to like do something, and hence I advise candidates, is try to prioritize certain activities in the different terms, because there would be a lot of things happening in one given point in time. There would be discussions going on around recruiting. You would be expected to, of course, focus on your academics. There would be opportunities for you to work on extracurricular activities. And there would be a lot of social events happening as well. And you would want to be a part of that because you want to know this cohort of diverse individuals who are studying in your program. So make sure you prioritize different activities because it could get overwhelming at times. And different terms for different individuals could mean different things. So try to make the journey your own by focusing on things that are relevant to you. A business school is a place that has a lot to offer even within a specific domain. So try to tie yourself to the resource that you want to explore and try to get out of that comfort zone as well in each term. Like try to do something that you would otherwise not do on your daily life. That would be my advice for admitted candidates, that plan your journey. Do know what you want out of each term of your study. Now, coming to the prospective applicants, I would urge for all of the candidates to spend adequate time in introspection and devising a story that is most unique to them. As individuals, we oftentimes try to bucket ourselves in a particular category of applicants. While that is maybe partially true, every individual has something to offer and something to talk about that is most unique to them. So try to find that through conversation with different individuals who know you. For me, that prime individual was Nupur in my journey. So try to have that conversation and come out with something that is unique to you and stick to that story in all components of your application. Think of your story as a thread that runs through your essay and your resume and even your communications and your interviews with the admissions committee. So try to maintain that consistency in your story, and I think you'll be good to go.
Beautiful. That's really helpful advice, Navneet. So, with that, we'll bring our show to an end. Navneet, I really, really, really want to thank you. You've shared just some wonderful nuggets. You've been very generous with your time. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Nupur, for this opportunity. I'm glad I could have this conversation with you. Once again, I wish all the candidates all the luck wherever they are in the process.
Thank you, Navneet.